Did you know that the ancient Gnostic philosophers knew that the structure of the universe mirrored the different layers of the human being? And with this knowledge, they had a perfect roadmap to all of the layers of human consciousness, and they were able to access their higher potential at will and bring about desired outcomes easily, predicting the future accurately, bilocating to physical places, telepathy, and the ability to rapidly self-heal are commonplace when one has this kind of knowledge, because you are capable of thinking the thoughts of the universal mind itself. It gave rise to the famous Hermetic law, as above, so below, as within, so without. And that by understanding the various layers, 7 layers in fact, of the universe, we can actually understand the layers of our own being that drive how our reality actually works. Because these layers form both the unconscious and the subconscious layers of our psyche, and also the energetic bodies that we possess. When we use this model to understand reality, we can master our reality to stay in good health at a fundamental level no matter what happens, and also co-create with divine intelligence in a process of spiraling upwards with no top end. Folks, this is where the good stuff happens. Hello, my name is David Kahn, and you are watching the Mechanics of Reality series on the octave.leap YouTube channel. In this series, I cover the most succinct synthesis of my 22 years of research into what reality is and what truth is from the most holistic perspective possible. This journey led me to spend 18 years in not one, but 2 lesser known mystery schools, learn from mentors who worked as astral projection agents and remote viewers with the highest levels of security clearance for government, believe it or not. I met with 3 individuals who allegedly came from the future and read a whole lot of incredible books that you can find in my resource list below. So in the last episode of this series, we covered how to expand your perception in order to perceive more of reality, which is important for us to spot new opportunities that might be positive, to see outside of the box that society tries to put us in. But in this episode, we're going to go deeper. We're going to cover the 7 layers of the cosmos, which are actually the 7 layers of the human being. And this episode is kind of going to be broken into 2 parts in order to keep things focused and not to saturate you with too much information too quickly. So this video here is going to establish the basis for the 7-dimensional construct, and the following videos in the series will go into detail on each of the layers that are contained within this construct. And this construct is typically what we call the universe. Now, when we know about the 7 layers of reality that comprise a universe, we can stop calling anything beyond the 5 senses woo-woo or vague energy, because we know the specific substrate that they're made from and how to work with them. So in other words, this is like a owner's manual to reality. So in the same way that a physicist doesn't just call different types of frequency energy, they classify it based on a period and a wavelength as sound waves, radio waves, infrared waves, light waves, and so forth, so that they can speak specifically about the qualities that energy possesses in each frequency bandwidth. So you'll learn in this video that the way I approach subtle energy, the way my mentors approach subtle energy, and the way many of the masters of old approach subtle energy is as precise as a scientist does. So there is no sentimentality, there's no wishy-washy here. This is precision, because once you know how to precisely work with this stuff, that's where the power resides. When you know what density level of reality you are dealing with, only then can you harness its potential to support you on your path and your endeavors. So let's dive in. So in order to master our reality, we have to understand how the cosmos itself works. The reason for that is because we got here into human form by stepping down as first being parts of the cosmos along the way. This knowledge is not new, but it has been hidden for millennia because this knowledge is considered dangerous. Dangerous to those who wish to sit in seats of power and rule over others, because this knowledge gives you the power to rise up, claim your potential, and become even more powerful than those who claim to rule this planet. Uh-oh. Now we're shaking up things with the big fish. But even more than that, it is dangerous to the forces that benefit off us remaining ignorant, the ones that harvest the gold from humanity in the form of the divine quanta that we possess. When we're tricked to give it up by believing things like, we got to slave away at a job for somebody else to pay the bills to stay alive, or that we can't manage ourselves and we'll fall into chaos and therefore we need a government to tell us what to do and also what to think. So you see, the only way to trick humans out of their gold is to get them to believe things that are really not true and to reinforce that time and time again. And so, when somebody says the emperor's not wearing new clothes, as the old fairy tale goes, it causes problems. There are times in history where you'd be killed for openly speaking about the material that I'm covering today. Of course, with the internet today, this stuff can't be hidden. It's just way too out in the open. There's way too many people that are sharing it. So the ruling forces do allow it to exist, but instead, they supplant it with various mistruths and distortions to misguide people. So a lot of what you find online has kernels of truth, but it actually will mislead you. And those distortions will carry you away from finding out how things actually work. It took me 22 years to distill this wisdom properly, and it comes directly from the unadulterated law of one as taught in Egypt before the Egyptian dynasties. And this lineage of wisdom came from far before Egypt. It came actually from a place called Atlantis, and it was carried forward through history. How do I know this? Well, believe it or not, my uncle is a 33rd degree Freemason. He was once the Grand Poobah here in Canada. And I remember him sharing this story with me when I was 12. Now, before you go, oh my God, you're a Freemason. No, I'm not. And I have a very different perspective on Freemasonry because I understand the tradition and I respect it. Has it been infiltrated and used for nefarious purposes in the modern age? Yes, it has. Is the original lineage an untainted record of information that dates back before the Great Flood? Absolutely. And within the teachings of Freemasonry, there's a lot of very good things. Unfortunately, it was a hierarchical structure, and because of that, it could be tainted, it could be overtaken and inverted, and that's what's happened in the last few centuries. But I asked my uncle where Freemasonry came from, and he responded that when the great flood waters of the Younger Dryas receded, there were two pillars standing which contained all of the instructions for restarting an advanced civilization. Joachim and Boaz, external representations of the masculine and feminine channels of Ida and Pagala that run through each and every human being. These pillars contain the original mechanics of reality for our current civilization, which trace its roots back some 10,000 years, but like I said, came from a much older source. So what they learned here with these two pillars is these are actually two energy currents in our body, but they actually mirror the way that we arrange our spaces and our geometry and even our societies. And just hearing about this source of wisdom may trigger a faint remembrance in you, because this is the fabric from which we are all cut and woven. I'd like to start with the foundational layer of reality. The foundational layer of reality is beyond words. Some call it God, some call it source. I personally prefer the term source field because it gives a sense of the all-pervasiveness. It's specific, yet it also is mysterious enough to honor this foundational layer of reality that is beyond words. But if we strip away the mysticism and look at the source field from an objective perspective, then we can define it scientifically as this: a hyperdimensional quantum consciousness of infinite breadth. So let's unpack this, because this is a mouthful. Hyperdimensional means that the source field exists outside of any sort of dimensional construct. So these constructs, which are universes, are contained as subsets within the source field. There are many of them. There's an infinite number of universes according to the modern multiverse theory. And this is theoretical physicists that are proving this mathematically. I'm not going to go into the equations. That's way too much for this channel. But in modern multiverse theory, they postulate that there's an infinite number of universes. Each universe is slightly different than the next one beside it. And so they all exist in slightly different quantum superposition states, meaning that they develop with slightly different operating systems or slightly different variances in laws. So we have the law of gravity, we have different temperatures where water freezes and boils. And if you vary these by even a small amount, 20 billion years later, your creation is going to look very different. So let's just label these so you can kind of get a sense of what I'm talking about here. Let's label them for simplicity. Let's call our universe quantum superposition state 41, or QS41, quantum superposition 41. And the neighboring universe is quantum superposition state 42, or QS42. So this one would be really similar to ours because they're at an infinitesimally small distance on an analog sine wave. And an analog sine wave is basically the difference in all of these quantum superposition states. So you can see all of the multiverse existing as a perfect sine wave. So these might develop quite differently over time, even though they're a very small, amount of distance between them. So even a 0.000001% difference could make a huge difference when projected over 20 billion years. So it means that maybe Germany won World War II, or Christopher Columbus never made it back to Europe, and North America was never discovered. You get the drift. So the source field just keeps pumping out universes like a breathing pattern, exhaling creation, inhaling annihilation. And this is wild to ponder. Like, this here is like, thinking about this is like a plant medicine trip. Infinite is something that we can't even imagine. It just means that anything is possible and can be sustained eternally. There's no death or decay, just a constant refreshment of life-giving quanta. Quantum implies that the substrate of the source field is very tiny or materially non-existent. If you read any Buddhist text, you'd see that they don't actually believe in a benevolent God like many other religions, but rather a stripping back of the various layers of phenomena until one reaches the ultimate layer of blissful silence or ecstatic nothingness. This is nirvana, liberation, heaven, or the state of complete freedom that underlies every great tale or drama towards redemption. If this is the initial source field of creation that underlies all of existence, why are so many of us subject to death, disease, scarcity, violence, and the complete subjugation of what seems like many, many laws? Well, there's a good reason for this, and we will cover the dimensional construct in the next video. This is where we get into why we end up like this, despite it being so good at that fundamental level of reality. And we'll also explain when it maintains congruent harmony with the source field, what that looks like, and also what happens when we end up in a system like ours that disconnects from the source field and goes into what's called a fall state. Yep, we're holding no punches in this series, folks, as I'm spilling all of the forbidden beans of how this thing works, this thing we call reality. So make sure you stay tuned. Now, if you want some practical support right now, and not just listening to me ramble on about the theory, I've got two ways you can get that. Number one is get your free Reveal and Heal Your Core Wound reading so you can start to decode the energetics behind how you personally went into a fall state and start to resolve the disconnection and come back into wholeness. Number two, register for the Pay What You Want 2-day masterclass on activating your multidimensional self-healing abilities and learn the secrets I've been alluding to in the first part of this video with all of the amazing abilities that we innately possess as human beings. It's in our genetic potential. All right, it's been a real pleasure doing this one. Make sure you stay tuned for the next video. It's the second part in this series where we're going to go into the 7 layers of the dimensional structure. So make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel with updates, and bookmark this playlist because it will most certainly be posted here. All right, folks, until next time, take care.